Hard work beats talent. This was the motto that Ikki Kurogane lived by. Throughout his childhood, he was shunned by his own family and treated as a disgrace for having the least magical ability. Tired of the abuse, he left his family's home and walked in the face of a cold, dreary blizzard until he collapsed from the snow, freezing his bones. It was at that moment his grandfather appeared and gave him the words he would never forget. Are you frustrated, kid, about the fact that you're the worst one? If so, hold on to that frustration. It's proof that you haven't given up yet on yourself. After the previous director nearly failed him, the newly instated director gave Ikki this ultimatum: to win the 7 Stars Festival or be expelled from the school. Heading home after another hard workout, Ikki finds Stella Vermilion in his apartment. She was a national princess, dressed in lingerie. Talk about a scandal. But to make things even better, Ikki doesn't apologize. He gets undressed as well. What an absolute Chad. Embarrassed by having a man lay eyes on her, she freaks out and smacks him in the face. The director had intentionally placed both of them in the same room because on the surface level, Stella was a direct foil to Ikki. Stella refuses the idea of living with a man, especially the worst man in the academy, so Ikki challenges her to a duel where the loser must obey the winner and do whatever they say. She had such immense talent and magical ability that she was able to summon flame dragons during fights. Many viewed her as purely talented without having worked hard, but just like Ikki, she had spent her childhood training to one day bring peace to her homeland. As they prepare to face off, Stella had learned about Ikki's reputation of being the worst one and failing the previous year due to his magic ability. Ikki responds by saying that the only thing he cares about is the fight ahead of him. The fight begins, and Stella immediately summons her flame-infused golden sword. She swings at Ikki, but rather than overpowering him, he constantly dodges her attacks until he successfully steals her swordsmanship, an ability he calls Blade Steel. To counter, Stella unleashes all of her power and calls forth the flames of purgatory, and as it all seems about to end, Ikki reveals his ultimate ability, Itoshira. His speed becomes inhuman as he runs across the stone to reach Stella, and with one foul swoop, he announces, "With my strongest, I will defeat your strongest," and ends the fight. Later that night, Stella realizes that Ikki may be the greatest teacher she's ever met, and says that she will keep her promise to let Ikki do whatever he wants. But rather than forcing her to do anything she would be uncomfortable with, Ikki simply asks her to become his friend. As Stella and Ikki are walking on campus, a mysterious girl with white hair appears, who Ikki instantly recognizes as his sister, Shizuku. But to everyone's shock, she pushes Ikki down and kisses him. Stella loses her mind and fights Shizuku and destroys the campus with her. They are forced to clean up all the bathrooms, and she learns afterwards that Ikki had been treated as a nobody by his family. Wishing to learn more, she confronts Ikki, where he tells her of how his family had treated him as a worthless being, and that he was only driven forward by his grandparents' words, where he said, "We are creatures without wings, yet we somehow landed on the moon." After hearing this, Stella is reminded of her own childhood, of how she worked hard and never gave up on becoming a knight. She comforts Ikki by telling him that they are both similar, that they are both competitive. To cool off for the weekend, Ikki hangs out with Stella and his sister, but as Ikki and Shizuku's friend, Alice, head to the bathroom, the mall gets raided by a group of bandits with guns. The bandits surround all the hostages in a circle, and the main bandit appears to be a blazer who can deflect Stella's own power against her. After Shizuku casts a water shield to protect the hostages, Ikki unleashes a Toshira and goes as far as to limit his own vision in order to concentrate his strength and increase his speed. He neutralizes the main blazer's abilities, but doesn't see there was a bandit hiding amongst the hostages. Unable to do anything, Ikki sees an arrow that comes flying from behind to neutralize the enemy, and one of Ikki's main enemies appear, Kirihara. He is the first opponent Ikki will face at the qualifying matches for the 7 Stars Festival. During the previous year, Kirihara had constantly targeted Ikki and tried his best to get him expelled. With Ikki's magical abilities being close to none, he only needed to commit a minor infraction for the school to expel him. Kirihara went on to attack Ikki in public, and sadly, Ikki had to endure that painful torture, as fighting back would give the previous director the excuse to expel him. The day of the first match arrives, and the fight begins. Kirihara unleashes his ultimate ability, Area Invisible, and the entire field becomes engulfed with a forest, along with Kirihara becoming invisible. Ikki, however, has prepared for this, as he is fast enough to see the color of the arrows. He begins counterattacking, but Kirihara has improved since last year, and even his arrows become invisible now. Being unable to see anything, and constantly receiving blows, Ikki begins to lose ground and starts to bleed out. And to provoke Ikki even more, Kirihara begins mocking striking him in front of the whole crowd, causing them to chant the name he has heard all of his life. The worst one! Frustrated by the crowd, Stella stands up and screams at them, "Don't mock the knight I love," and forces Ikki to get back on his feet instead of giving up. These words fuel Ikki, and immediately, he unleashes a Toshira. He analyzes all of Kirihara's emotions behind his words, tracing them back to their source. This was the perfected version of Blade Steel. This was perfect vision. With it, he was able to rush towards Kirihara, deflecting all of his arrows and eventually destroying his forest, along with any confidence he owned. But after winning, he collapsed. Ikki wakes up at the hospital, and Stella yells at him for risking his life. Realizing he disappointed her, he apologizes for making her worry. A few moments of silence pass by them, and then Ikki says, "I like you, Stella." Flustered by Ikki's honesty, Stella gives him a kiss on the cheek to accept his confession. 2 weeks go by of Ikki and Stella dating, yet their confession was the only affection they have shown to each other. She later finds Ikki agreeing to help other women, and Stella grows jealous by this. Even guys begin to ask for Ikki to train them, so Ikki and his new students go to the pool for a practice session. At the pool, Stella wears a revealing bikini to try and grab Ikki's attention. A girl questions Stella about her relationship with Ikki, and tells her that she should make a move on him, because if she waits too long, Ikki will find another woman. The girl then asks Ikki to meet Stella somewhere private, hoping that this could improve their relationship. When they're together, Stella shows off her bikini to Ikki, but he doesn't seem the slightest bit interested. Ikki begins to tell her that they haven't done anything in 2 weeks, and Stella begins to cry, thinking that he has already left her and wants to break up with her. She begins screaming at Ikki, telling him that of course he doesn't love her, and that he prefers other girls. She tells him that she no longer wants to be with him either, to which Ikki is confused. Ikki explains that he does love her, and that he just doesn't want her to think he is desperate. At the end of it, they both calm down and say what they want at the same time. A kiss. They kiss and solidify their relationship. During a walk home, they meet a clumsy girl who has been stalking them for the past few weeks, Ayatsuji. She happens to be the daughter of the once famous last samurai, who was once Ikki's idol. She wanted to meet Ikki so he could help her become a stronger knight. After excessively touching her all over her legs, Ikki fixes her stance to give her more power in her strikes. On the walk back, she tells Ikki how much she likes his hands, and how they remind her of her father's. Later at a restaurant, Ayatsuji, Stella, and Ikki are confronted by a group of thugs. They harass Ayatsuji, and Ikki stands up for her. The thug leader grabs a bottle of wine and begins pouring a cup for Ikki, but then slams the bottle on his head while he drinks. Rather than retaliate, Ikki stays calm and holds Stella back, keeping a smile on his face. The thug spits on Ikki, but he still does not retaliate. After they leave, Ikki explains how fighting would have only gotten Ikki expelled, and that the thug leader seemed extremely strong. Ayatsuji explains the story of her dad losing the dojo against the thug, and how he fell into a coma that day, saying "I'm sorry" before going unconscious. But just then, they receive a notification. They were going to be each other's enemies at the next competition. The following night, she messages Ikki to meet her on top of a building, where she has a mysteriously sinister look on her face. She purposely pushes herself off the building, forcing Ikki to use a Toshira to run down alongside the building and destroying it just to save her. She makes it very clear that all she wanted to do was force Ikki to use his ultimate ability before their match, as his ultimate ability has a 24-hour cooldown. During their match, Ikki begins to seemingly get caught by air itself. Wounds begin to appear upon his skin non-stop, but he predicted this. Before the match, he met with the overseer of the game to request that it wouldn't be stopped, regardless of whether his opponent was cheating or not. Having forced him to use a Toshira unethically, he knew she would cheat even more, and he was correct. She had planted invisible sword mines all across the field that would cut into him. But having known this, Ikki realized Ayatsuji's true nature and used perfect vision to trace her character back into her true self. He was able to dodge every slash she had planted on the field and defeated her to win the match. But Ikki does not hold a grudge. Knowing that sometimes he needs to support a misguided friend, he instead helps her to try to reclaim her dojo. Determined to help Ayatsuji, Ikki heads to the dojo her dad lost to the thug, and finds the leader, Sword Eater, sitting inside of it. He challenges him to a duel to take ownership of the dojo, and Sword Eater agrees. The match between the two is about to begin, and Sword Eater calls forth his blade. A serpent made of bones emerges, almost slashing him in the face, but he tames it. Ikki summons Intuts, and the fight begins. Immediately, Sword Eater's attacks are able to push Ikki backward, and Ikki stays on the defensive, unable to find a striking opportunity. As Ikki attacks, he notices that Sword Eater parries at extreme speeds, and is able to strike much faster than any other person he has encountered. Sword Eater unleashes his blade, allowing it to fly across the dojo to attack Ikki. His attacks approach speeds that Ikki can't handle, allowing Sword Eater to dodge and launch an attack at the same time. Once Sword Eater landed a hit that was almost fatal, Ikki realized that his opponent had an ability that was superior to most humans: extreme reaction speed. Sword Eater was able to create 4 or more hits by the time that Ikki was able to land just one, and Ikki even had to use irregular guarding with his blade just to survive. Ayatsuji began crying, wishing for Ikki to be safe and confused at how Sword Eater was smiling through this fight. Stella reminded her that a true swordsman enjoys their craft, and that Ikki is enjoying the rush that comes against fighting a worthy swordsman. Ayatsuji realized that her grandpa was also smiling during his fight, and that he was actually saying sorry to Sword Eater for disappointing him, rather than to Ayatsuji. To end the fight, Ikki exclaims to Ayatsuji, "With all my strength, I will bring back your 2 years." With his full force, he rushes down Sword Eater without dodging any of his hits. He raises his sword, and as he runs, it becomes apparent to Sword Eater that this was the same skill Ayatsuji's father attempted to use. With all the snake bones rushing at Ikki, he continues to charge down until he reaches his opponent, and ends the fight with the last samurai's move. After Ikki helped Ayatsuji reclaim her dojo, she visits her father at the hospital, where he finally wakes up from his coma. Ikki and Sella go on a vacation after being invited by the director, but when they were greeted by the student council, it was apparent that this would be far from a vacation. They spent their entire time just cleaning the student council mansion, but after a hard days of work, Stella wanted to climb the mountain with Ikki, wishing to have some personal time with him. Climbing up the mountain, Stella began to feel tired and had to sit down for a while, and Ikki wanted to know if something was wrong. With a storm brewing, Ikki took her to a nearby wood cabin he found. She was soaked, but Ikki helped her change. When she asked him if he wanted to sleep with her, Ikki rejected her. This guy just keeps becoming more of a Chad every single second in the show. Although Ikki rejected her, it wasn't because he didn't want her. It was because he wanted to be able to proudly celebrate being with her in front of his parents and hers. She even felt more satisfied with that answer, but was still disappointed with herself. Going for a walk outside, Ikki saw a gigantic stone golem ready to crush the cabin, and in a split moment, activated his Toshira to save Stella. Fighting the golem, he was able to constantly crush it, but it only broke down into smaller golems instead of being destroyed. After vainly attempting to slash it non-stop, the student council president, Toka Todo, appears. After a few slashes of her running across the field, she releases her ultimate attack, Raikiri. Like lightning, her lips move without making a sound, and a few seconds later, the words are heard with a thunder. She finishes the monster that was being remotely controlled by a human. Meanwhile, Shizuku is at her parents' home where she meets with her father. Her father is proud of her succeeding during her matches and thinks she will become a worthy knight. Shizuku explains that her brother is also winning, but her father doesn't seem the slightest bit concerned with him. After Ikki and Stella come back from the so-called vacation, Ikki's sister is notified that her next match is Raikiri. Shizuku cares for her brother and wishes to be the one that will allow him to feel all the love his family never gave him. She thinks that Ikki must view her as a woman to do so, and notices how highly he thinks of Stella. She knows that winning this fight will be the only chance for her brother to recognize her as a woman. As the fight begins, Shizuku appears to be controlling it as she is able to keep a distance away from the president, creating water walls to block her lightning strikes. She even freezes her in place and creates an ice meteor large enough to crush Raikiri. But that wasn't enough. After a while, Toka appears instantly in front of Shizuku, where she barely dodges. With Shizuku being bewildered by this ability, she resorts to her final offense and launches water clones of herself to dodge the attacks and create opportunities of her own. A fog clouds the view of the field, and as Shizuku is continuing her assault, she prepares for the final strike. She gets within arm's length of Toka's neck, but in the last moment, Toka releases her Raikiri and strikes down Shizuku, winning the fight. In the hospital, Shizuku asks for everyone to leave, but Alice chooses to stay. He hugs Shizuku, letting her know that her brother saw all of her courageous strength and that he knew how hard she worked for this. Shizuku breaks into tears, and after her father finds out that she lost, he tells a sly-looking man to do as he wishes. During the fall, Ikki and Stella were going for a walk where they renewed their promise to fight each other at the top of the Seven Stars Festival. They kissed each other, but a man took a picture of them. Later that day, the student council called on Ikki and Stella as they wanted help bringing a bit of joy to an orphanage. After preparing meals with them and helping the kids have fun, Ikki was introduced to Toka's true character. She was a caring person who wanted to provide love for every child who didn't have parents. He realized it was this side of her that gave her strength she needed to keep moving forward. But Ikki wondered, what was the source of his strength? Once they got back from their trip, Alice and Shizuku came along to let Ikki and Stella know they were on the front page of all the news, and the sly-looking man appeared again. Ikki agreed to come with the man for questioning regarding his relationship with a foreign princess. After arriving to the place, everything turns into black and white, as Ikki's soul seemingly knows the torture it's about to experience. He is locked up in solitude and questioned every day by people wishing to defame him. They want him to be expelled from the school for having a scandalous relationship with a princess. At the place, he is forced to continue having his matches against other opponents, and then stay locked up in solitude until the next questioning. Stella thinks that she should break up with Ikki in order for him to have a better life, but Shizuku shuts her down immediately. She lets her know that Ikki is doing all of this just so he can stay together with Stella, to try and give him courage. Stella cuts a strand of her hair and has a teacher help her sneak it into Ikki. This was the only piece of hope he was able to get. Thinking he could solve this problem, Ikki requests to meet with his father and gets the opportunity to talk with him. Ikki meets with his father, who explains that he has always been proud of him, to which Ikki seems delighted to hear. His father, however, goes on to say that teaching a skill to someone without talent is worse than useless, crushing Ikki's spirit. He realizes that his father didn't hate him, he simply never had any hope for him. After that day, Ikki was notified that his final opponent will be the president, Toka Raikuri Todo herself. That if he was to win, this investigation would be over, but if he were to lose, he would give up on becoming a knight and get expelled from the school. The day of the final festival comes, yet Ikki is nowhere to be found. He has 15 minutes to arrive before the match is forfeited and Ikki loses. The director questions the sly man about his whereabouts. He replies that Ikki decided to walk to the tournament by himself before he could get a ride. Battered from prison in solitude, Ikki appears to have rarely slept or ate. He is once again fighting for his life just to keep walking. He remembers the night of the blizzard, where he used all of his strength just to keep going. He wondered if his grandfather's words were all just a meaningless way of giving hope for a man who would never achieve anything in his life. But just as he is about to fall in the snow once again, he feels a warmth he didn't have before. A blaze lights up around him. He finds Stella holding the medal that qualified her to the Seven Stars Festival, and remembers all the times and hardships he has been through with her. He remembers that he still has a promise to keep with her. So he enters the ring, and battered as he may be, he is determined to fight. Once the fight begins, Ikki unleashes his ultimate ability immediately, screaming, "Itoshiro!" This was a move he has never done before. He had always used his full ability for a minute, but this time, he realized that no matter how long he drew the fight out, he would eventually have to face Raikuri. So in order to win, he would have to beat Raikuri head on. He charges forward. He doesn't need 1 minute for this fight. No, he only needs 1 second. So he concentrates every last drop of his energy and blood into this one strike. Neither fighter cares about the outcome of this match anymore. It doesn't matter whether the fight was fixed or what lay against the line. To these two swordsmen, the only thing that mattered was beating the knight in front of them. Ikki uses Raikou, his 7th secret sword, and in one leap, Ikki launches toward Raikuri. In that instant, the fight is over. After winning, Ikki had one last objective he wanted to accomplish, so he hung on to his life until he could complete it. When Stella came and hugged him, he realized this was the warmth that he needed to fight against all of his struggles. It was this warmth that helped him survive in the snow. So he took a step back and proposed to Stella in front of the whole world. After Stella said yes in front of everyone, it became clear nothing can separate these two swordsmen. Thanks a lot for finishing this journey with me. This was one of the best endings I have ever seen in an anime. Make sure to subscribe, and if you would like to watch a more serious video, click on the next one.